Hey everyone, and welcome to another HOI4 mining lesson on the Iron Workshop. In this lesson, we'll learn how to create new railroads and supply hubs in HOI4. So before we start, let's go over the stages of this lesson. First of all, you will need to enable debug mode in order to create new railroads and hubs. So make sure to do that before you start the lesson. If you don't know how to enable debug mode, I'll have a link to that lesson in the upper right corner of the screen, so check that out to enable debug mode. Next, we'll talk about creating rails and hubs using the nudge tool, and that is the best way to do that. There are files that govern these mechanics in the game files, but the nudge tool is really the easiest way to do this, and it actually works, so that's great. And towards the end of the video, I'll talk about creating rails and hubs with the in-game effects. That means that I will explain how you can do these things in-game while the game is running with effects that you can apply to focuses, events, and decisions. Alright, so with that said, let's roll the intro and get on with the lesson. Before I go into the nudge tool and start creating my rails and supply hubs, I do want to mention a couple of things. For the purpose of this lesson, I've created a small mod. I've called it the choo-choo mod. And in here, right now it's empty, but we're going to be moving files into here once our rails and supply hubs have been created with the nudge tool. Now in the game, in order to see the nudge tool option, you do need to be in debug mode, so make sure you are in debug mode before you start. Another very important thing is that you need to make sure that you don't have UI scaling enabled. If you have that enabled, the nudge tool will not display the rail layout map mode correctly, and things might get weird and not align with the world map. So make sure that is disabled. To make sure it's disabled, go to Options, Video, and in here set the UI scaling to 1.0. Once you do that, you will need to restart the game, but that is fine. Just restart the game and then go into the nudge tool and click on Supply. In this lesson, we will be creating rails and supply hubs for Afghanistan. Now, the reason that I chose Afghanistan is because it's a country that doesn't have any rails and supply hubs, so it will be much easier for us to see the changes that we make to it. Now before we start, I do want to talk about the various colors that we have in this map mode. So if we go here, we see that we have all kinds of colors in here, and I want to make sure that you understand what these colors mean. So yellow nodes are nodes that are capital nodes. So whenever a country is created in the game and it has a capital state, then that state has a capital, and the province capital is the default capital supply node. And that one is created automatically for you. You actually don't need to create it on your own. Next, we have these dark blue nodes. These represent supply hubs that originate from ports. As you know, ports are supply hubs of their own, so they are marked with this dark blue color. These purple color nodes are the existing supply hubs, the land supply hubs. So as you can see, we have quite a few of them in here, and we have none in Afghanistan, but we will take care of that. Another color that you may encounter is this light blue or cyan color. These indicate railroads that are not connected on both of their ends. That means that we have a railroad probably going from here to this province in here, but it's not connected on its other end to anything else. It's just there to make sure you know that there is a rail in here, but that it's not connected. Alright, so let's begin by creating our first rail network in Afghanistan. So we have our starting supply hub in the capital of Afghanistan. So I'm going to click that, and I'm going to hold the Control key on my keyboard and click it once more. Once I've done that, I need to click on the next province where I want the railway to be built. So I'm going to click in here, and this red line indicates that a rail line will be laid out in here. Now please note that if I let go of the control key, that line disappears. And that is because this map mode has two modes. First of all is the planning mode, and once you're done, you need to click in here in order to end your planning and actually execute the planned railway line. So I'm going to click once again. And now let's just lay out the entire rail network before we let go of the control key. Now please note that when you're holding the control key, you can't zoom out the map, and that is quite an annoying restriction of the nudge tool, but unfortunately we do have to get used to that. Maybe it will be fixed in an upcoming update. So once we have our rail line set, we need to click here on Add Railway, and of course I can determine the level of this rail line. Let's just set it to 3, and I click on Add Railway, and now I can let go of the control key, and we have our first rail line set. Now you can click on this line in order to select it, and of course you can once again change its level. And if you want to add more directions to it, or to extend it, or maybe even reduce it, what you need to do is to click on the province. So let's say that I want to remove this last line. I just click on the province here and it goes away. And if I want to add it back, I just click again. I don't have to click on the icon, just on the province itself. If I want to extend the line, then I click on the next province. And now, since the rail line is already set, I can let go of the control key and it will take into account these additions to the rail line. Alright, so we've created our rail line, and of course it makes sense that along this rail line we may want to build some supply hubs. So how to do that? I'm going to deselect the rail line by clicking on an empty province and not on the rail line itself. And I'm going to put my mouse cursor on a province where I want to create a supply hub. And I'm going to hold the Shift key and click. Now you see that I have this, let me just click again. Actually, I'll zoom in. Now, once I click, you see that I have this red icon appearing. And now I have this button here that says Create Node. And once I click it, you see that we've created a node and we have that purple color for the supply node. Excellent. Now, of course, you can create these anywhere you want. So it's really as simple as that. Let's just go ahead and create another one in here. And we have another node. And that is basically all you need to know about creating rails and supply hubs. Not so difficult. Once you have everything laid out, you need to click on Save. And now all of this information will be saved to the Documents folder of HOI4. Let's go ahead and see how we can put that into our own mod. Alright, so I'm back in my Choo mod folder. And in here, I'm going to have to create another folder in order to put the information about the rails. And alongside that, I opened the Documents, Paradox Interactive, HOI4 folder as well. And in here, you now see that I have a folder called Map. Now this folder was created once I clicked the Save button in the Nudge tool. And inside of it, I have two files called Railways and Supply Nodes. And these are the files that will determine the railways and supply nodes or supply hubs that we've created. So all I need to do is to copy this folder from here and put it into the base folder of my mod. That means the first folder of my mod. So if I'm in mod and I enter my mod folder, it needs to be in here inside a folder called map. Now just to make sure, let us enable the mod, start the game with the mod enabled and see if Afghanistan now has railways and supply hubs. Alright, so I started a new game and I loaded Afghanistan. And if we were to look now, you see that we have this very nice railway line and we have these supply hubs in here, just like we've created in the Nudge tool. Alright, so that is all you need to know about creating new railways and supply hubs in HOI4 using the nudge tool. But what if you want to create some rails as an effect for a focus or an event or a decision? Let's go ahead and see how to do that now. Alright, now let's talk a little bit about how we can create rails while we are in the game itself. So in my Choo-Choo mod, I have a folder called Common National Focus Germany. Now this is of course just an example to show you how to do this. What I'm going to do is that I'm going to apply the effect for creating new rails for Germany's Rhineland focus. So let me just go into the game in here and open the focus tree. This is the focus that I'm interested in, GER Rhineland. So let me just locate this focus in the file. Alright, and what I'm going to do is that I'm going to replace the completion reward in here with an effect that will build a rail line. There's a very specific code for doing this, and you can find that code on the HOI4 wiki. I will have a link in the description of this video, so make sure to go to the wiki because it has a lot of other stuff that you could find very useful. But for now, let me just copy this code over here. There are two types of this code, and it has some stuff which is very useful and some stuff which you might not care for. I won't be going over each and every part of it, just the important things. Now, because I am in debug mode, the changes that I'm going to do here in this file are going to be reflected in this focus immediately. And that's very good because then we will see how these rails will be built. So let's take a look at this completion reward section. And the code is called build railway. So in here, first of all, we determine the level of our railway. Next, we have build on allied. So you can set an ability to build these rails on the territories of your allies in case you are in a faction. Next, we have the controller priority. Now, I'm not really sure what that does, and the wiki doesn't actually explain it properly. If any of you know what this is used for, please let me know in the comments, and then I can highlight that comment so that all of us can know. I suggest that this might have something to do with the controller of the provinces where you build the rails with regards to your allies. So let's say, for example, if you have a state that is controlled by a couple of allies, then maybe you will prioritize building a railway for the provinces that are controlled by the tag of the country that you put in here. But I'm not really sure about that. That will require some testing. But it doesn't really matter because that's not really the most important thing about this code. I'm actually going to remove this altogether. We really don't need this for now. Next, we have fallback. Now, fallback is also not a very critical aspect to this code. So if you want to know what that means and what it does, make sure to read about that on the wiki. I'm going to remove that as well. When building rails with this effect, you can choose between three types of how this will be executed by the game. The first type is the path, and that means that you will tell the game exactly which provinces you want the rails to go through. Now, you need to make sure that these provinces are controlled by the country where this effect is used by. So, for example, in this case, it's Germany. If one of the provinces in here is not controlled by Germany, then this effect will not work. So make sure to double check that these provinces are controlled by the game. And if I were to save this focus right now and we go into the game, you see that it will build a level 1 railway from Brandenburg to Saxony. The other option that we have is to specify a starting province and a target province, where the railway will begin and where the railway will end, and the game will choose its own path based on various conditions. So if you want to build a rail, you can either use this line in here and specify the provinces. In order to get the provinces, you will need to be in debug mode, and then you can just hover over each province, and in here you will see the number of the province, or you can click on Ctrl and Alt and it will tell you the province ID, and this is the number that you need to put in there. So you either use this option, this whole line, or you're using this and this line. Don't use them together because I think that can actually confuse the game quite a bit. If you do want to build a couple of them, then you can definitely duplicate this whole thing like this. And for example, build a rail line using this code in here and using this code in here. Just make sure not to have these comments in here. So this one, as I said, will tell the game exactly which provinces to go through. In here, you just specify a beginning province and an ending province, and the game will decide how to lay the tracks on its own. There is a third option, and let me just get the code for that. The third option looks like this. Let me just get rid of some of this code so that we don't confuse ourselves. And with this option, you can specify a state. So let's say that you want a railway to go from one state to another. You can just specify the state numbers. So let's just give it a small test run. Let's say that I want a railway to go from here, from Hanover, and this state ID is 59. So I'm going to type 59 in here. And I want the railway to go all the way to Schleswig-Holstein. And this ID is 58. So let's type 58 in here. Save the focus. And now if we take a look here, we see that a railway will be built from Hanover to Schleswig-Holstein. Let me just finish this focus really quick. And as you can see, we now have this railway going like this. All right, so this is how you build railways in the game itself using the game effects. Now, in case you want to build supply nodes and not rails, there is also an effect for that. So let me just copy the code over here and we will take a look at it. So the code is add building construction. This is very similar to how you build civilian factories and military factories. And then the type is supply node, we have the level, and we also need to pick the province where it will be built. Now make sure that in here you first specify the state where it is built. So for example, if I were to save it like this, and we take a look at the focus, you see that it doesn't specify the state where it will be built. So let's just pick a state where we want a supply hub to be built. Let's, for example, build a supply hub in Leipzig in here. So the province ID for Leipzig is 3535. So I'm going to put 3535 in here. And of course I have to specify the state, which is 65. So I'm going to type 65. I'm going to open a new bracket. I'm going to enclose this one inside of the state ID. Click save. And if we take a look at the focus now, we see that Saxony will have one supply hub built. Let's just see how it goes in the game itself. Let's refresh the map mode. All right, so now we have another supply hub added in Leipzig. Now I will have the code for the construction of the supply hub in the description of this video, so make sure to copy that in case you want to use it. All right, so that's all there is to building railways and supply hubs in HOI4. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like so that others can see it and learn how to create railways and hubs in HOI4 as well. If you have any issues, please let me know in the comments and I'll do my best to help you. This is it for this lesson. Thank you very much for watching and I will see you in the next one. Bye bye.